So I get quite a lot of questions and comments asking me about different kinds of boxes, and especially what people should get if they're wanting to get started learning. So I'm going to try and answer a lot of that here as much as I can. It can be a confusing instrument to get started on, just because there's quite a few different like layouts and keys that these instruments come in. They can look kind of the same, they can sound kind of the same, but yeah, they're set up very differently for different kinds of playing, and usually which one you go for will depend on what style of music you want to get into, or multiple styles of music. And getting the wrong kind of thing as your first box can really slow you down and impede your ability to learn stuff in the early stages. Yeah, there are definite pitfalls which I'll try and tell you how to avoid here. Yeah, first thing you're going to want to decide if you wanted to get started on an instrument like this is what key or layout you're going to go for. So you'll have heard they come in things like DG, GC, BC, and the convention is that those are the names of what key each row is in. So, you know, on these instruments, each row of buttons just plays like a major scale up and down one key. Is the basic idea. So, like the earliest, simplest forms of these instruments, one row boxes, you would just have one row of buttons. It plays one major scale, and on the left hand, you'd probably get two buttons, one of which plays a bass note, different on the push and pull. The other plays a chord, different on the push and pull. And the way this is set up is so that the one pair of basses and the one row of buttons it goes with. So if this is in the key of G, as this one is, the inside row, all the notes of the chord of G are on the push, and our G chord is on the push on the left hand. So that goes nicely together. And then the other chord you get is the one you're most going to need to accompany simple tunes, the 5 chord, so D when we're in G. And that goes pretty well with everything that you've got available on the pull. So if you're just playing simple major tunes, you kind of get automatic harmony and things work out nicely like that. But then things get a bit more complicated when we add more rows. So the naming convention is outside row, then inside row, outside row on the edge of the keyboard, and then inside row nearer the bellows. So this is a DG box, outside row in D, inside row in G. You will see people refer to them sometimes as GD boxes. You know, it's a definitely established naming convention, but people still go against it occasionally. So I'll talk you through the different keys and what you might want to get for different styles of music. Okay, so first let's talk about Irish music. So if you want to get into playing traditional Irish music in the traditional way, then for most beginners, what I'd recommend you get is a BC accordion. In fact, something else I probably should have talked about right at the beginning. So whether these are called Melodions, accordions, button accordions, diatonic button accordions, again, it kind of depends on which, where you're from and what style of music you're getting involved in. In Ireland, this would always just be called a button accordion, and everyone knows what that means. In Ireland, you'd only call something a Melodeon if it's a one-row box. I'll talk about those in a minute. Whereas, in other styles of music, you might find people are calling anything that looks like this a Melodeon. So for Irish music, I'd recommend most people get a BC box. There's kind of two main systems of two-row box that are common in Irish music: BC and C-sharp D. And the only reason I'd usually recommend a beginner go for a BC box is just because it's slightly more common. And so especially if you want to teach yourself, you'll find a lot more resources available for learning BC. There's lots of good stuff online. There's more books, that are aimed at learning BC. whereas C#D just slightly the less common. But reasons you might want to go for C#D. So if you want to get lessons in person, which I'd very much recommend to anyone if that's an available option for you. You might first want to find out what teachers are there in your area, who can you get lessons with, what box do they play, and that might decide it for you whether you go BC or C#D. If you've already been listening to a lot of players and you find all your favourite players play C#D, that might sway you. One other reason I'd mention, so we talked about the one-row instrument, Melodeon. I haven't got one to show you here, but those are also played in traditional Irish music. Pretty much always a one-row box in D, because there's a lot of Irish music in D, but also having the D scale will let you play there's a lot of Irish music that's in other keys but only uses the notes that are available in the D scale. So they're pretty common, but they are an instrument where you'll more quickly run into sort of problems and limitations that you have to work your way around. You'll hear a commonly played tune, you'll think, oh, I'd like to learn that, and then you'll find that your box hasn't got, usually a C natural or maybe some other notes that you need to play that tune. And that can be fine. There are, there's people who play one row D Melodeon, for their main music, their main instrument. But you're just going to have to be prepared to run into more of those issues. So again, if you're in any doubt, go for a BC box, maybe a C#D. If you want to learn the one row D Melodeon, you probably know you do. The other thing is, if you feel drawn to that instrument but you're not sure about the limitations and things, then that might be another reason to go with a C#D box, because if you learn to play the C#D, then you'll find you can pretty naturally play a lot of stuff on a one-row Melodeon. It has the one row in D just the same on both instruments, so anything you learn on your C#D box that doesn't need any of the notes from the outside row, that will then translate straight onto a one-row D Melodeon. So why does BC work out as a good layout to play Irish music on? Because most Irish music, D major, G major, E minor, A minor, none of it's in B major. But the way of playing BC accordion for Irish music has kind of evolved, and people have figured this out. The idea is you've got all the notes on here, it's fully chromatic. The scale of C, that's all your white notes on the piano. And the scale of B includes all the black notes on a piano and a couple of the white notes as well. So you've got everything here. So any scale you want to play, you can find all the notes. And I think one of the reasons it lends itself well to Irish music is just because for any note on the C row, you've got the semitone below right next to it on the B row, so you can get lots of these slidey sounding ornaments, and in particular this roll that Irish players like to do, where you're getting like a note above and the semitone below. Some of them come out sounding like a bit like jazzy and contain notes that are out of the key. You'll definitely hear that in the playing of BC box players, but it's it's part of the style. A lot of people go for that. Other people avoid it by doing these other kinds of rolls. But it just means that BC, it's just a tried and tested system for learning Irish music. What most people play, so it's probably what you should go for too. Okay, the next system I'll talk to you about is DG, which is if you especially if you live in England and you want to play English music, this is what most people out there are going to be playing. If you see a Morris team with a box player, that's almost always going to be a DG box. If you go into a pub session where people are playing English tunes and people have boxes, they're almost certainly going to be DGs. Traditional English music, like Irish music, tends to be in D major and G major. Yeah, partly down to the different sort of way you want it to sound and differences in style. It works out really well to play just on a box where you've got those two keys available on the 2 rows. Yeah, in fact, I haven't really mentioned with the Irish stuff about the left hand. A lot of Irish players playing in a session, especially where there's guitars and other instruments playing chords, they might not do much with their left hand. They're a lot more focused on right hand melody. You do hear a lot of Irish players playing the left hand as well, and especially playing solo. If you listen to like the competitions at the Flowers and things, then all those players certainly play fully accompanying style with both hands. But it's a bit trickier working it out at first how to play your left hand accompaniment on a BC. Whereas on a DG, if you're playing a simple tune in G on the G row, then the G chords just work, and same for the D row. E minor's pretty easy as well. Okay, so yeah, DG lends itself well to being able to play a very full sound with both hands right from when you're getting started. And in fact, most complete beginners having their first lesson on this instrument, I would get them playing a tune with both hands together by the end of a first lesson. So it's pretty straightforward to do on this. If you're, again, a lot of people might want to play more than one style. And if you're interested in playing, Irish music as well, then a DG will work pretty much as well as a BC or a C-sharp D. The only reason I wouldn't recommend it to someone who's exclusively interested in Irish music is just because it's not part of the tradition. It's, Irish players in Ireland don't really play DG boxes. But you can learn to do a lot of pretty similar stuff that comes out sounding pretty similar. In particular, if you compare a DG to a C-sharp D box, a lot of the stuff you'll end up playing on the D row, it comes out exactly the same. You can use all the same kind of ornamentation, yeah, it'll work out in a similar style. And a lot of, like, some of the ornaments we're showing you for the BC, they can all be imitated or adapted on the DG. You've still got a lot of notes where you can slide up from a semitone outside on the other row. The rolls, the kind of planar kind of roll I showed you on the BC, where you don't put in the semitone below, they're exactly the same to play on the DG. Yeah, if you do want to get those, there are ways to imitate that 5-note roll. Yeah, don't use them much, but they're there. So yeah, DG, it's the only instrument I actually perform on. All these other kinds of boxes I have pretty much just for teaching purposes, for teaching people who play those layouts. As a performer, I only use a DG. I take a DG box to every gig. Because another thing that may as well come up at this point is, so again, you might think a DG is limiting in that you, unlike the BC, you don't have all the notes available on these 2 rows. It's not fully chromatic, so you can run into tunes in different keys that you might not be able to play. But there are, there's ways to sort of start getting around that. First of all, A major tends to work out pretty well on an ordinary DG, and that's one of the most common keys you'll run into. So partly because quite a lot of tunes in A major just don't have the G sharp in, which is the note you're missing. And if they do, that note's usually one you can dodge around quite easily and substitute in other notes without it really, changing the melody too much. But then going forward, as you advance as a player, you'll have seen. In fact, I'll grab a different box. But you'll have seen there are boxes that just have more buttons on. So, this is my main gigging DG box. it's got the same row in D, the same row in G, but then it's got these extra buttons, which are basically all the other notes that you don't have in the keys of D and G. So I can play in B flat, you know, I can play in F major, you know, E major, F sharp minor. You know, so it's suddenly, yeah, a lot less limiting. So yeah, it's worth knowing that if you're starting off on DG, it doesn't mean that, you know, further down the line you're not going to be able to play tunes in all these other keys that that come up in folky repertoire sometimes. But having said that, for beginners, I'd always recommend get yourself a 2-row box to get started on, because you know, there's hundreds and thousands of tunes you can learn on this, and a lot of people stay on a 2-row box DG for their whole playing career and don't find it much of a limitation. You can absolutely go out and play with other people in English sessions, Irish sessions, like French, European music sessions, and still be able to manage like most of the repertoire that's going to come up. And yeah, from experience of like teaching a lot of beginners, I think some people who try to start on a 2.5 or 3-row box, it can just lead to a bit more like initial like, you know, confusion or making it harder to find the buttons you want, and also temptation to start using those other buttons too early. Always think it's a bit of a mistake to start, you know, experimenting too much with the buttons to play in other keys before you thoroughly know your D and G rows. And yeah, also if you start using like reverse notes that are available to stop you having to make quick bellows movements, then that cuts out the learning of like really important skills early on. So generally, yeah, I would say, you know, even if you know, money is no object for you, start off on an ordinary 2-row DG. But yeah, I consider DG incredibly versatile. It's good for English, it's good for Irish, it's good for French and European music. Okay, so GC box, most common for all kinds of European, French, Balfolk type stuff. Yeah, Breton music. Generally, yeah, most box players are going to find on continental Europe, Belgium, France, you know, Netherlands, Italy. They're playing GC boxes. And what you might have noticed more as well, if you're going to gigs, watching stuff on YouTube, whatever, seeing the sort of you know, well-known professionals bands and stuff, a lot of them are more often likely to be playing 3-row boxes with 12, 18, you know, even 24 basses. That just tends to be the way, because again, you know, as I showed you on the DG, once you've got these extra buttons, this stops being an instrument that plays in G, C, and the most closely related keys, and it becomes a fully chromatic instrument that you can, you know, really once you're up to an 18 bass, if you have a decent layout, it will play in all keys. Yeah, I'd say it's generally true, the more buttons your box has, the less it matters what key it's in, which is why, you know, most people who, you know, start on a DG, as you progress up, and if you get to a point where you want to play in different keys, usually your best route is to get a box with more buttons, rather than just continually buying more boxes in different keys. Having said that, some players do go that route and it works out. You know, if you just really like playing your 2-row, a lot of DG players go on to buy like a CF box, especially. It's kind of used in the same way as like a guitarist uses a capo. It just means, you know, you get to play tunes you've learned with the same fingering, but they'll come out in a different key. So, you know, for instance, like a lot of DG players who go to French music sessions, if they're staying on a 2-row, they'll have a CF as well, because they work out well most of the time for playing in D minor and G minor, that are common keys in those sessions. And obviously C major and F major. But yeah, the other route to go is more buttons, so you just get one box that does everything. That's the way I like to go myself, partly because I don't want to cart more boxes around. Some other reasons I prefer for going that way are obviously if you're only going to have one instrument, you can get like a higher quality instrument by spending all your money on one really nice box rather than spreading it around among lots of instruments. It also means more musically. There are lots of tunes that change key within the tune. There are tunes where it might be in D major A part, D minor B part, that kind of thing. Or tunes are often played together in sets, and sometimes there might be funny key changes within those sets. Again, if you're not choosing this yourself, this might be dictated by sessions you go to, bands you play in, things like that. And yeah, if you're going the way of playing 2-row boxes and just managing with what comes out of those, then more often that's going to run into problems where you might need to change instrument in the middle of something, or some tunes might just not work out at all. Whereas as soon as you're on an instrument where all the notes are here, fully chromatic up and down the range, then you pretty much can do anything. And again, 3-row 18 bass even gets you more towards the stage where if you're listening to like piano accordion players or chromatic button accordion players, you will be able to do most of what they can do. There's occasional clashes where there are certain right hand notes you can't play against certain chords, but you do at least you have all the basses, you have all the right hand notes. So yeah, it's as I say, as you have more buttons, it's less important what key your instrument's in, but it's kind of a matter of convention that GC is the common key for European players. And it does also mean that, again, if you go into sessions where more people are playing 2-row instruments, then more of that's going to be designed to fit on the 2 rows. A minor especially is incredibly common for European box players. Lots of waltzes in A minor, mazurkas in A minor, and that all fits really nicely on the GC. Although again, if you play DG and you've got a couple of extra buttons on your box, you can play all that stuff in the same keys on a DG box. So I think that mainly covers the keys of boxes that I would recommend to a lot of people getting started. Just on keys that I either don't know much about or don't recommend. So you may have seen out there's a lot of 3-row boxes that are ADG or GCF. So if you want to get into Mexican music, then those are the things to go for. I think also possibly like some kinds of German folk music, those are common. Nothing I really specialise in myself. But the mistake, I think beginners buying boxes need to avoid with those is people sometimes buy an ADG box thinking, a lot of, especially like if they want to get into Irish music, Scottish music and so on, it's like, D and G are very common, and then A is probably the next most common major key. So that box will be able to play all those keys. And it's true, it can, but I always think an ADG being used in that way, it's kind of a waste of the extra buttons, because you get more repeated notes between the rows. A lot of the A row is the lowest, and a lot of tunes in A, they use more of the high range of the notes in the A scale, so you end up with sort of some wasted low notes. And also just given that a DG, and especially a DG with an extra few buttons, including a high G sharp, will play very well in A major, you're almost always better off using your 3rd row of buttons for other things. So as a beginner, I'd say just get an ordinary DG box, and then if you're looking at 3 rows in future and being able to play in A major and other keys as well, you're better off getting a D, G and accidentals 3-row rather than an ADG. And in fact, you can have those boxes converted for players who are wanting to get into a 3-row box without maybe spending as much money. Quite a good option is there's a lot of old Hohner 3-row boxes out there that can be converted to DG accidentals by good box fettler. and those work out being really good boxes that you can start to get a lot of extra flexibility in what you're able to play on a more affordable box. Same for so GCF boxes out there a lot, and a lot of people interested in European music sometimes buy one of those instead of a 2-row GC, and that can actually work out a bit worse than players of English and Irish music getting an ADG, just in that on an ADG at least you've got exactly what you've got available on a 2-row DG, and then just some extra stuff that may turn out not to be the best use of the buttons. Whereas on a GCF, you haven't quite got available everything you'd normally have on just a 2-row GC box. In particular, just the normal chords you get on the left hand, you won't have the F chord on a pull. Don't get that on a normal GCF box. And that's something you're going to want a lot, again, in the early stages of learning a lot of common repertoire on a GC box. So getting a GCF can really, again, cause you some problems. But again, having a GCF box converted to GC and then a row of accidentals and a more useful left hand, as you'd find on a conventional GC accidentals 3-row 12 bass. That can be a really great box, and in fact that's what I got started on myself when I wanted to get into playing 3-row GC box. I bought an old Hohner Corona GCF, and then I had a tuner change the inside row to accidentals, change the left hand, and again then it's an incredibly good and flexible box. But again, I'd say beginners go for a 2-row normal GC box. Okay, so having decided what key or layout of instrument is going to suit you, then you need to think about what you're actually going to buy to start playing on, and whether you go new or second hand and so on. Something to be aware of is that it's almost in terms of how good your box will sound and how nice it will be to play. Often it matters more, how it's been tuned and set up and had work done on it. That can almost matter more than how good a quality instrument it was in the first place. If buying second hand, especially, you've got to be fairly careful about that. If you just buy, I fell into this mistake myself. The first instrument I bought to learn on was very unsuitable because, for one thing, it was an E-flat, B-flat box, which, again, you can do a bit of playing on your own at home, but as soon as you're trying to, learn anything from recordings or join in with anyone, it's useless. And also it was a very old, I think it was a Galotta box, in really bad condition, out of tune, kind of hopeless. I took it to a tuner who did, improve it somewhat, but it was still, by no means an ideal thing for getting started on. So, be wary if you're going to buy anything very old, because again, there are, if you go on eBay or whatever, there's a lot of very old Honers especially, and other old boxes that might just not be in playable condition at all. I think one of the best things you can do as a beginner, and what I'd recommend, for lots of beginners, is try and find Hohner, especially an older Hohner, but buy it from someone who restores and tunes them professionally. And there's quite a few people out there doing that and selling them. Because often that's it's usually better than a new box of equivalent value, for one thing, because again, these instruments they go out of tune when they're brand new. They often have a few teething problems and can need some attention early on. So if you're buying the instrument, it's like buying a car that's just been serviced and MOT and so on. You just know that everything's going to be right on it when you get it. And usually, it usually means there's also someone who will be prepared to fix some things on it if anything does happen to go wrong. After you've bought it, they often come with a bit of a warranty or whatever. So yeah, sort of, you know, middle budget option, yeah, that I'd most recommend for most beginners is, you know, Hohner Pokerwork, especially these kind of boxes, or Erica are similar. Yeah, they make very good beginner boxes as long as they've been well fettled and well tuned. Another reason they're good is, I'd recommend to, again, really strong recommendation for beginners here is try and start on a medium-sized box. Don't buy anything that's a bit miniature, like, you know, Hohner Lilliput, a Castanari Lily. Again, you can learn to play on those, people do, but again, I think they slightly slow you down in the early stages, and it can be a bit harder to manage your air and so on, and play, you know, as expressively with them. And similarly, don't, you know, even if you've got the money to spend, don't buy a Handry 18, you know, big 3-row Castagnari as your first box, because a much bigger, heavier box, you know, again, I've been there, I've seen beginners trying to learn on them, and it definitely just slows you down in the early stages. It's harder to get your technique right when you're learning to play on a big, heavy box. So yeah, something the size of a Hohner Pokerwork is perfect. They're very lightweight. Some people say the buttons are a bit less ergonomic than the posher boxes, but again, if it's been well handled by someone who restores and tunes them, then it shouldn't be too bad. Often they do things to quieten down the mechanics of the whole thing. So yeah, that's a strong recommendation. If you do want to spend more, then and what I often recommend is like a first upgrade as well, if people are wanting something different, is get a box with some more voices, DG players especially. So, you know, on the normal range of your instruments, as you get up to the top end, these highest buttons, you know, you might think, oh, very squeaky up there, not within the normal range of most folk tunes, why would anyone be using those buttons? But if you get a 3-voice instrument, that usually means it's got an extra reed that's an octave lower, and it kind of thickens out the sound of those notes at the top. And yeah, it just starts to make that part of the range quite usable and sound quite good. So moving tunes up an octave becomes an option. And a lot of music that is composed by box players might rely on using that high part of the range, but they're playing it with a 3-voice box where it sounds good, and then sometimes if you try and play that on your Hohner Pokerwork, it won't sound great in the same way. Also on the left hand, some boxes come with a stop for the thirds. Again, that's a handy thing if you can get it. Although if you don't get that, then there's other options. I have a video on how to tape up your thirds as a different solution. But yeah, a third voice is good, and some people just prefer the feel again of these boxes. They're constructed a bit differently from Hohner. This is a Serenolini, which again is I guess it's at the slightly cheaper end of the posh boxes. Up at the more expensive end, you have things like Castagnari, which are superb, and if you can afford to start off on a Castagnari, then very nice. Again, on that side of things, I'd recommend just get a medium-sized 2 or 3 voice 2-row 8 bass box, and you'll have a great time. So yeah, I think that's most of what I've got to tell you for now. This has all been a bit rambling. I didn't script it, and I don't know how much I'll edit it, but yeah, if you've got any more questions, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll get around to answering some questions or making another of these videos at some point. But either way, if you're going to learn one of these instruments, best of luck to you. I hope you have a good time. Thanks a lot.